All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Minnesota paid family and medical leave. My name is Luke and I'm a financial planner here at eWealth Partners. Before I hand things over to Brian, John, and Connor for today's presentation, I just want to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to drop those into our Q&A chat. We'll be actively monitoring that throughout the presentation and we'll do our best to address as many as possible. Today's session is being recorded and we'll make sure to share a copy with all the attendees afterward. Today's webinar will be focused on everything you as a business owner need to know with regards to Minnesota paid family and medical leave. Taking us through our presentation, it will be Brian Admick. Brian is a founder and partner here at eWealth Partners and brings a wealth of knowledge helping business owners navigate all types of challenges, with paid family and medical leave being a great example. Additionally, we will finish with a Q&A session with John Jandro and Connor Lance. John is another partner and financial planner here at eWealth, and Connor is also a financial planner here. Both are excellent resources for our business owner clients and are excited to answer any questions you have following the presentation. So now I'll pass it over to Brian to kick things off.
All right, Luke, let's go. All right, let's first start with what is Minnesota paid leave? So Minnesota paid leave and paid family and medical leave, or PFML, is a brand new state program launching January 1st of 2026, so upcoming here. From your perspective as a business owner, this isn't optional. If you employ even one person in Minnesota, you are in the program, either through the state plan or by applying for a private plan exemption, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. It gives employees up to 12 weeks of medical leave and 12 weeks of family leave per year, with a combined maximum total of 20 weeks. During this time, employees receive wage replacements from the state or private insurance and job protection from you as their employer. Job protection meaning you're required to return the employee to the same job they left, or a job that is equivalent in pay, benefits, and working conditions. The idea is to provide workers with income security during major life events, whether that's recovering from a surgery, bonding with a new child, caring for a sick parent, or addressing a personal safety issue. Now, some of you may be wondering, is Minnesota the guinea pig here? The answer is no. Minnesota joins 9 other states and Washington, D.C. in providing statewide paid leave. California started their program back in 2004. Since then, more and more states have followed suit, including New York, Connecticut, Oregon, and Colorado. What's different is that Minnesota's version is one of the most comprehensive in terms of who's covered and how much leave is available. All right, so qualifying events. What type of leave does paid family medical leave, PFML, actually cover? There are 4 main categories: medical leave, family leave, military leave, safety leave. As you can see, medical leave is in one grouping, and family leave is the bonding, military family leave, caring, and safety. So on the medical side, it's for think of it for the employee's own serious health condition, including from a pregnancy, illness, injury, or ongoing medical treatment. On the family leave, that's going to be include family bonding with a new child through birth, adoption, or foster care. Military leave, think of if they're called to active duty. Safety issues, investing on the domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking. And then just also the caring side is caring for a family member with a serious health condition. And technically, it doesn't necessarily have to be a family member that they're caring for. The maximum combined in 1 year is 20 weeks. So it could be 12 weeks of, bonding and then 8 weeks of medical. All right, so now let's talk about, well, how is this funded? It's funded through premiums, and we have some additional slides later in the presentation. We say premiums, but I think it makes more sense of like understand it as a payroll tax. Large employers, their premium is 0.88% of employees' wages, where half of that is paid by the employer, so 0.44, and the other half is paid by the employee, So the other 0.44. For small employers, 30 employers or less, that is reduced down to from 0.88 to 0.66. And you can see that reduction being applied to the employer side. And again, we have more slides on this, so we'll go into detail that later. Before we get into more of the details, like who is eWealth Partners? Why are we presenting on this? So let's just spend just a minute just to understand who we are. So we are a financial planning and wealth advisory firm serving business owners. We're located here in Minnesota, in Minnetonka, Minnesota. Most of the business owners that we work with have less than 50 employees. So we're kind of targeting for our presentation that small business owner, that small employer. And as we say, like if it touches your if it touches your business cash flow, it's going to impact your family cash flow. And so we know how to plan around that. What does that mean? How do we plan around that? What do we do? Okay, as financial planners, we do financial planning, investment management, tax planning, insurance analysis, estate planning, the whole gamut of like anything that kind of, as I say, like, touches a dollar sign and just planning is what we help our business owner clients with. Topics that we cover. One that I just go back to in the past is we got heavy into becoming and just understanding and becoming experts on the PPP loans and the employee retention credit piece of it. There was a new tax code that was passed earlier this year that we'll do other presentations on that to understanding what retirement plan is best for you and your employees, 401k versus simple versus profit sharing. So that's who we are. Let's now bring it back to the presentation and understand, okay, as a business owner, how do you become compliant with this whole paid family medical leave? First, let's just understand your responsibilities. One is you have to report wages and determine which employees are eligible. Two, select a plan, either stick with the state plan or apply for a private plan. Three, you need to inform your employees about the program in your decision. And four is paying the premiums. We'll talk about kind of timelines and what each of these means, but you need to stay compliant, and if you haven't already, as an employer, you'll need accounts with both unemployment insurance. So if you have a UI Minnesota login, you're essentially auto enrolled. So paid leave has partnered with UI to use its online system for collecting wage details. Uh, Now, when premium payments are due, you'll actually go into that program and make the premium payment. So long story short on this, make sure that you're enrolled and you do it through the same place where you do your unemployment insurance system. All right, now let's talk about who actually qualifies for paid family medical leave. Most people who work in Minnesota are covered by paid leave. Eligibility isn't limited to full-time employees. Part-time, seasonal, in some cases, even employees who recently left your business can qualify. Undocumented workers, youth workers, and new workers are also covered. If you are self-employed, a freelancer or gig worker, you're not automatically covered, but you can choose to opt into the program. Furthermore, on the employee eligibility, let's talk more through like the criteria. And if the employees are covered if they've worked at least half of the prior year in Minnesota, or if they live in Minnesota but didn't work more than 50% of their time in another state, they also qualify. So even if you have someone who splits their time, if their primary work or residence is in Minnesota, they're included. Second, there's an earnings test. So employees qualify if they've earned at least 5.3% of the state's average annual wage in the previous 4 quarters. So for 2024, currently that threshold is about just over almost 3,800. So that's a very low bar, which means almost anyone who's been working part of the year will qualify. Finally, coverage doesn't kick in immediately. An employee must be with you for at least 90 days, calendar days before the coverage begins. After that, they're eligible to take the leave if they have a qualifying event. All right, so understanding what we call like wage payments or the benefits that are paid to the employee. this is kind of where it gets this the formula the state has is a bit complex. Just know the max weekly wage is 1,423. Um, on the next slide, I'll make more sense of it, but just know as an employer, you can choose to top off the benefit, paying the difference to bring your employee closer to their normal wage. That's optional, but something to think about, especially if you're trying to stay competitive as an employer. Here's a great slide that kind of gives examples of the benefit payments to employees. On the far left, we see employee wage compensation, annualized, right? Because remember, this is only paid out for up to 12 weeks or the combination of the two up to 20 weeks. So we break it out on the far left of like their annual compensation. And then the second one we see is, okay, what is that annual compensation weekly? So for example, let's look at someone making 50,000. 50,000 weekly is $962. If they would go on to paid family medical leave, they would get $805.37, which represents 84% of their gross salary. And so if we go to 100,000 annual salary, so again, they get up to 12 weeks, 20 weeks combined. They are receiving about 72% of their gross pay. So again, this might be a place where an employer chooses to top that off. Um, the higher we go in income, if we look at the bottom there, the $200,000 example, right? If they would go into paid medical leave and the employer is not topping it off, they're going to receive about 37% of that gross income. All right, now we're going to talk about the funding. How is this funded? What they call the premium rate. It kind of looks and feel like a payroll tax, so we're familiar with how you pay your employees portion of Social Security and Medicare tax. This is similar. So under the state plan, the premium is 0.88%, 0.88% split evenly between the employer and the employee. Employers must cover at least half, but can cover more if they so choose. But you'll see if you're a small employer, you have a reduced rate of what you need to cover. So with that, instead of being 0.44, it's 0.22. Again, I have some additional slides that'll make some sense of this. Just note that the premium rate is capped at the Social Security wage cap, meaning you stop paying the premiums, you in the employee, where currently that Social Security wage cap in 2025 is just over 176,000. As mentioned, for small employers, let's maybe just first define a small employer. You are a small employer if you have 30 or fewer employees and the average wage of all employees is 150% or less than the statewide average. What was that in 2025? In 2025 is just over 107,000. So again, 30 or fewer employees and the average wage of all employees is less than 107. If that's the case, you then qualify for a reduced premium rate of not 0.88%, but 0.66%. What you may notice here is that employer minimum payment moves down from 0.44 to 0.22. The employee portion, they're still paying that 0.44. So it's a reduction for the employer, not for the employee. As I mentioned before, an employer could cover all of it if they wanted to, but they have to at least hit that minimum. Here's another one, just kind of giving a good example. Let's maybe the top part is, I'll call it a larger employer, and then the bottom is that smaller employer. And if you just let's look at the 2 million total payroll on each one, and you can see the annual employer paid on the large employer, right? So there's more than 30 employees. The employer is paying 8,800 in that case. If we go down and look at the small employer, it's reduced from 8,800 to 4,400. As you can see, if they're having the employee cover their portion, that number remains the same for the employee. An additional benefit through the state plan is the small employer, there will be grants that will be made available from the state to support small business during that employee's absence. The benefits could include up to 3,000 to hire temporary workers, increase existing workers' wages to substitute for like an employee or increase their skill set. All right, so now that we kind of have the idea of the plan itself, the next step would be is either selecting the state plan or a private insurance plan. If you do nothing, you'll be auto-enrolled into the state plan. Um, you can apply for an exemption for private insurance. That deadline to get that exemption is November 10th. Any of these private insurance plans that are out there, they must meet or exceed the same benefits as the state plan. And so most of these insurance carriers are smart enough that they're likely not going to exceed the benefit, but it's going to basically be equal in design and benefits. Okay. And we'll talk through more about these timelines, but if you don't do anything, you don't figure out, get a quote on the private insurance, you'll be auto enrolled if that's something that you're going to look into. And we have some reason why you might want to consider that. You really should start coding that out now. And because you need to get that exemption from the state by November 10th of 2025 here. All right, what are some possible private plan advantages? With a private plan, you may get a lower premium rate, which we'll explain here on the next slide, especially if your workforce is considered lower risk. Uh, with a private insurance carrier, the claims process is already established, as we outlined before. There's other states that have been doing this for what, over 10 years. Those carriers have been doing this for many years, so your employees are more likely, we think, to get a smooth, predictable experience. You also have access to a dedicated resource through that insurance carrier. That means real people who can help with compliance claims and account questions instead of being stuck on hold with the state. You'll have a team that knows your business. Private plans usually offer online claim reporting and status updates, so both you and your employees know where things stand. And it's more of a one-stop shop. And if you do have other benefits like disability, long-term disability, short-term disability offered to your employees, it might make sense to use that carrier as well. We can kind of help think through that. Now, compared to the state ran plan, and we don't know, this is the first year they're rolling out. Maybe they're going to do an excellent job rolling this out and hiring and all that. But there also could be some speed bumps, right? Claim decisions and payment times probably will vary substantially. And you're dealing with one centralized service center that has to support the entire state. If we look at furthermore, like when a private plan may make sense, what we're finding from a private insurance carrier is if you're in these low claims, less risk industries, they're going to get a reduced rate. But so what we're finding if you have 24 or fewer employees and you employ 40% or more male workforce, and you are not in healthcare, not in social services, not an auto dealer or transportation, there's a good chance you will get a reduced rate lower than the state rate of 0.66 down to 0.59. And same thing, to abide by the Minnesota state rules, you still can push off that 0.4 to the employee, so it'd be reducing the employer rate in this case from 0.22 to 0.15. So not substantial on the premium piece of it, but it definitely can be lower. That coupled with the potential other benefits of a private plan, it's just something we're telling our small business owners, especially here, 24 employees or less, just to get a quote and start thinking through that. Know your options. Um, in additional future webinars that we'll do, we'll kind of dive into this deeper of what if you go onto a private plan and your employees go on claim? Is the insurance company potentially going to jack up their rates? We've gotten that question quite a bit. And they could. If that's the case, then you can always go back to the state plan. And there's some rules around that that we'll do other future webinars on. Just wanted to note of that. If you're gonna research a private plan right now, get a quote. We can help you get a quote. I don't know if there's someone that you work with, but it's really simple of just providing an employee census. You don't need like, their socials or even their names just to get an idea of what that would be. But what we're saying is know by the end of October because if you're going to move forward with that private insurance plan, you have to get that exemption authorized, stamped by the state by that November 10th deadline. All right. So now moving on to informing your workforce and other deadlines. As I just mentioned, by the end of October, we highly recommend getting a quote for a private plan to see if that even makes sense. We can help you with that. November 10th, you need to have that application into the state of Minnesota for that private plan exemption. And something maybe I should have talked about too is um, this likely isn't going to be with more of our target audience of, smaller employers, but one of the other options is you can have a self-funded plan and, take out insurance, essentially, just be your own insurance company and self-fund that. That is another option. You would also have to make sure that you get that application in and approved for that exemption. December 1st, you need to notify employees your plan decision. Minnesota versus private plan. In January 1st, payroll deductions begin. Employees may start using paid family medical leave as well. And again, we're going to have a bunch of webinars on this, but talking through is your payroll set up to start withholding those contributions for this payroll tax, this Minnesota paid family medical tax? Is it set up? And then what happens if, at the end of the year you have, the biweekly includes December and the first week of January. Well, okay, make sure it's just pulling January 1st on. And so we'll get more into the details on that piece of it. Those are just some common questions of like, how do I know my payroll set up? And we're trying to work with some of the major payroll providers to get some clarity of how they're doing that. And we're trying to get we're a payroll specialist to actually kind of do a presentation with us that has some of those finer details on that. And then at lastly, April 30th, that first quarterly premium either to the state or to the insurance company is due. So make sure that you withhold that and you are compliant in paying that premium. Okay, so let me pause here and just think through. That was a lot of information. We'll go into a Q&A here in a bit. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of topics around this, and we're taking the angle of how does it impact the business owner? We're putting our business owners caps on to say what are the questions, what are the concerns, how do we, even communicate this to employees, and what are the potential um, impacts just to the business, right? And so we're going to have additional webinars, as it relates to employment law, as it relates to kind of the whole payroll, as it relates to um, the intermittent option. We have a slide on that here in a bit, but just know that like we are becoming, we spent already many, many hours fully understanding this stuff, so you don't have to. You can use the code here to scan and then schedule a consultation with us if you want to check out a private insurance quote. Additional questions on that, feel free to reach out. The whole team of advisors here are deep into this and can help provide some guidance. But let's go into questions.
All
And Luke,
right.
you get to lead that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had some great questions come in, so I will jump right into it. I can knock out a couple here before I hand the reins to Connor and John for the tough ones. But we did have another question, just will this be recorded? Absolutely. And we will make sure to distribute that recording to everyone who attended today. Will you guys be hosting more webinars coming up? Yeah, I know Brian kind of alluded to this throughout the presentation, but we will continue to host webinars around kind of Minnesota paid family leave in general, as well as all the topics that it touches. So definitely be on the lookout for those, and would love to hear from anyone in attendance if there's any specific topics you'd like to see upcoming webinars on. All right, so first question that I will throw over to John here is what communication needs to be given to employees by December 1st?
Ooh, employers have to notify their employees of the plan they have selected. So whether they choose to go with the state plan or the private plan, and then kind of highlight the benefits of whichever plan they choose. The state has not issued specific guidance on what needs to be included in the notification. Employers are also required to post a notice in their workplace illustrating the benefits of the paid family medical leave program. We're monitoring both of these closely, and we'll provide updates as we receive them from the state.
Awesome. Thanks, John. All right, Connor. So we have this very common question that we've gotten. If an employee had a child during 2025, are they eligible to take leave in 2026?
Yeah, that is a common question I've been hearing. Yes, the answer is yes. Employees are eligible to take the leave if the child was born in 2025, provided that the start date of leave is after January 1st and that is taken within 12 months of the child's birth. And the state will begin accepting claims for those bonding leave starting in 2020 or November of 2025. So coming up here.
So
Uh,
just be prepared as a business owner that if someone has, had a baby in 2025 here, they might, be taking leave January 1st, right?
awesome. Thanks, Connor and Brian. All right, John, will payroll be submitting these premiums on behalf of the employer?
Um, This really depends on the payroll provider. Our understanding is that for those on the state insurance plan, this will function very similar to unemployment insurance and be automatically paid on the employer's behalf. If you would like to go with the private plan, they will need to log into their insurance portal and pay their bill quarterly.
Thank you, John. All right, Connor, we had a fun one here on intermittent leave rules, as that is something that is on a few employers' minds.
Yeah, these rules, the intermittent rules will have an impact on employers. Simply said, employees are allowed to take intermittent medical leave if they have the approval from their doctor or medical professional. And the way I think of that is if they have to have a treatment every Tuesday from 9 to 12 p.m., they are allowed to do that. For family leave, it's still a little bit of a gray area regarding the rules. According to the state, intermittent leave must be taken in increments consistent with the established policy of the employer. The state also requires that the employee make a reasonable effort to schedule leave so as not to disrupt the operations of the employer. However, if the employee and employer can't agree, the employer cannot require that the employee change their leave schedule to accommodate the employer. So that being said, the state will take into consideration any information that the employer provides when approving or adjudicating claims. So the way I think of that is if the employee never told the employer or gave zero notice, and the employer, I guess, relays that to the state will take that into consideration. So still a little bit of a gray area on this, but we're still continuing to track updates on this for you. So good question.
Awesome, Connor. All right, last question here. I'll throw it to John. Do health insurance premiums need to be paid while the employee is on leave?
Yes. So insurance premiums still need to be paid if the employer pays a portion of the premiums via payroll. The employer needs to go to the employee and receive the payment from the employee directly.
Awesome.
So have fun with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so just know that
that's
if
a
you're,
conversation probably to lead into before they go on leave, that they'll still be required to pay those premiums.
yeah, and obviously employer has to pay their portion while they're on leave, but then the employee, right? So plan for that. And another one that came up that, especially for our S corp business owners, which a lot of them are, at least the ones that we serve. Remember, you're the employer and you're the employee, and so you also qualify for this. Um, And we are working with the state and better understanding that, but something that if you have a qualifying event, where unlike unemployment, a lot of us don't opt into that as the business owners, but this is one that we as business owners are eligible for. And you can have company policy around to supplement, that wage replacement to make you more whole. And business, what we're finding, at least when we have been reached out to the state, is business distributions or draw don't impact that paid leave. So this is just kind of the first time I feel like in a long time that like, okay, there's an option for the actual business owner.
There's definitely material here that can be planned around for owners.
Hmm.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Brian and John. Brian, you got any wise words for us to wrap us up today?
Oh, other than our disclaimer. No, take a second to read this, everyone, but more so work with professionals, reach out. We really truly intend to be a subject matter expert on this. And so, this is impacting in a way our business owners' future cash flow. So we spend the time to really understand it. And just kind of the planning considerations and just stay tuned. We're going to keep pushing out stuff around this topic. And if you have any ideas of other relevant topics to this, one piece of feedback too, just as is, as you can see, we're targeting more of the small employers, so large employers, especially over 50 employees, the whole family medical FMLA. If you're 50 employees or less, it doesn't impact you. So that's a whole different angle. In some sense, we aren't avoiding it, but to our audience, this is really new to them because they haven't been impacted by that in years past. So that is all I have. Anything else you got, Luke?
No, appreciate everyone joining, and we'll make sure to send out the recording of this webinar and any other helpful resources to everyone in attendance today.
All right. Thanks all.
Awesome.